Hey all, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this one we're going to be covering my top 8 Faith builds in 2024. We're going to start here with the Magma Blades. I know a highly requested build here, and this is part of the reorganizing of my channel where we're going to be doing top 8 for each damage or each stat type in Elden Ring. Speaking of which, last week we did Dexterity, this week we've done Faith. Whatever you want to see next, whether that's Strength, whether that's Magic, or Intelligence rather, or Arcane, whatever it is, comment below. Whatever one gets the most comments, I'll do for next week. Yeah, so the Magma Blades are really fun. I do find that there's a direct upgrade later in this video that I'm going to show off. It's probably a build you guys know about if you're a fan of my channel, but overall the Magma Blades are quite good with the Ash of War Magma Shower, the unique Ash of War, and if you combine jump attacks, they can do a ton of fire damage. By the way, if I sound a little bit different, I've had a cold or I've been sick for the past 7 days or so. It's kind of been lingering, but I've still been playing a ton of Elden Ring. DLC got me so pumped up for just so much hype behind it. The trailer looked incredible. I cannot wait for Elden Ring DLC. I'm super excited about it. Pretty cool weapons, and that's why they made it number 8 on my list. We're going to jump into equipment. For this, we have 2 of the Magma Blades. Very difficult to farm for, but they are worth farming for at plus 10. We have the Raptor's Black Feathers, any seal for buffs. We have the Fire Scorpion Charm, Shard of Alexander, Claw Talisman, Rotwing Sword Insignia, Thorny Tear, Faith Tear. We're going to jump into stats. By the way, the Ash is split between Faith and Strength, as are the weapons themselves, although the Ash leans a little bit more towards Faith, but I made it a combination build, because you can build up on successive attacks with the Ash of War 2, and then combine it with jump attacks, so it kind of boosts both. For buffs, we use Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Blessing's Boon. And at number 7, we have the Envoy's Longhorn, which is an incredibly powerful holy weapon, and honestly one of my favorite weapons in the entire game, because destroying some of the tougher, bigger bosses in the game with bubbles, there's nothing like it. It's incredibly fun, and I definitely recommend trying this one out. Yeah, as far as the bubbles go, the small and big one are just okay. The medium-sized one, though, causes absolute destruction, and is definitely worth picking up. The Ash of War scales entirely with your Fate stat. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have the Envoy's Longhorn plus 10, we have the Erdtree Seal plus 10 because it's good for Faith scaling, we have the Envoy's Crown, Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Sacred Scorpion Charm, Ritual Shield Talisman, Holy Tear, Faith Tear. Let's jump into stats for this one. And some of these stats are similar, some aren't. This one gets to 80 Faith, 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 24 Endurance, 20 Strength, so you can switch to any of the other builds, and you can use the Jellyfish Shield too, and then we're using Golden Vow and Hellish Brewery to buff the bubble damage. This one is excellent against big targets. And at number 6, we have Dragon Incantations. Technically Faith and Arcane, but these are Incantations after all, and they can be used with the seal, so I kind of count them as Faith, and they can be quite good too, and they can do a lot of damage. You can even get some Frost build up here, as you can see initially, and the magic damage. I was starting with the Frost one to get the debuff, and then jumping to Glintstone Breath to get in some good magic damage. You can get a lot of damage out of the Dragon Incantations, and the Roar Medallion now boosts breath attacks too, so that's a plus. By the way, if you're ever down here, don't forget to grab the Godslayer's Greatsword. This is the Divine Tower in Caelid. We're going to jump into equipment now. For equipment, we have 1 Dragon Communion Seal fully upgrade Jellyfish Shield. You can use 2 to stack the boost, but I only used 1 for those that can only get 1. We hit 51 Poise, Ritual Swords Talisman, Roar Medallion, Magic Scorpion Charm, Flox Canvas Talisman, Magic Tear, Faith Tear. We're using Sleeping Pots here. We're going to jump into stats. For stats, we have 45 Faith with the Faith Tier and 45 Arcane, so we're getting really good scaling on the Dragon Communion Seal. We have 60 Vigor, 23 Mind, 24 Endurance, 20 Strength for the Jellyfish Shield. The ones we're using, by the way, was the Frost Breath to start and get the debuff, and then we're using Glintstone Breath. You can use Rot Breath too, that's a really good one, and we're buffing with Golden Vow and Hellish Brewery. And at number 5, we have Black Flame Tornado. Black Flame Tornado does a ridiculous amount of fire damage and percentage damage too, and believe it or not, it scales entirely with your Fate stat regardless of the weapon that you use. I'm using the Grave Scythe here because it has near colossal AR and Flame Art, and that's a huge benefit for us, but overall, even on the Magma Worm, who's decently fire resistant, especially for big targets, you can get a ton of damage. This is another really enjoyable one to try too, so give this a shot. Try it on the Grave Scythe. It's really good in terms of AR. Try this on a bunch of different weapons in Flame Art. You'll find it to be really versatile too, especially since you're pulling directly from your Faith stat. And what I mean by that is you're going to have high Faith, so you can throw in Black Flame, use the Godslayer Seal, Black Flame Ritual, whatever ones you want to throw in, combine it with this, and between this and those incantations, you'll get a ton of fire and percentage damage, and you'll chew through boss HP. It does take a little bit of skill and placement to use, no doubt about it, because of the lack of hyper armor. Same thing with the Godslayer's Greatsword now. I hope eventually maybe they give them some hyper armor, but I guess that's the trade-off for getting so much damage out of them. Yeah, it definitely checks the boxes for both fun and powerful. One I definitely recommend too. No question about it, recommend trying this build out and keeping your faith around 70 or 80 if you can get that high at 60 vigor, and you're going to get a ton of damage out of this, take down some of the bigger bosses in the game. In a second here, we're going to go over equipment for this build. For equipment, we have the Grave Scythe in Flame Art with Black Flame Tornado. The Godslayer seal will go well with this. I was just using any seal for buffs. You can check out the armor set there. Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Fire Scorpion Charm, Ritual Shield Talisman, Fire tier, and that was actually supposed to be the Faith tier instead of the Authority tier. Yeah, it doesn't build up on successive attacks. That was a mistake. I forgot to change it from another build. So Fire tier, Faith tier, that would get you to 80 Faith, 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 24 Endurance, 20 Strength. And then to buff this, we're just using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. You could use Hellish Reburer. I think that's going to end up being 5% more because it's mostly fire and percentage damage. And at number 4, we have Burn O' Flame. Much like Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike, this is another one that's going to rely a little bit on RNG, but you can actually destroy so many of the big, especially the bigger bosses of the game that get hit with most of the pillars, Malenia included, because it can knock her down. So many bosses take good fire damage that Burn O' Flame is a great way to take them down. Another one that's fun to use. Most Faith builds are fun to use, but this one is really enjoyable because you can buff it up like crazy, and if the RNG hits right, it causes absolute destruction and so much fire damage. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have one Giant Seal, or you could use two. We're using the Jellyfish Shield here. We hit 51 Poise. We have the Ritual Swords Talisman, Godfrey Icon, Fire Scorpion Charm, Phlox Canvas Talisman, Fire tier, Faith tier, and we're using Market Shackle to stun him. And then in a second here, we're going to go over stats for this one, and a lot of these stats are similar because we're hitting 80 Faith for a lot of these. We have 80 Faith with the Faith tier, 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 24 Endurance, 20 Strength for the Jellyfish Shield. And then we're using Golden Vow and Hellish Reburer instead of Flame Grant Me Strength. The reason for that is it's going to be 5% more because Burn O' Flame has no physical damage component. It's going to be all fire damage, so you'll get 10 seconds longer out of Hellish Reburer and 5% more damage. And at number 3, we have my favorite one on this entire list, and that's the Burning Bandit build. The Burning Bandit build focuses on 2 Bandit Curved Swords in Flame Art with Flaming Strike on each one, giving you 750 AR on each Bandit Curved Sword. Yeah, the whole objective here is to combine both jump attacks and the Flaming Strike Ash of War. So you use the Shard of Alexander, build up on successive hits, and you're going to get massive fire damage while having a ton of faith scaling with both of these in Flame Art affinity. By the way, this can absolutely destroy Malenia and Radagon with their 0 fire resistance, as well as Morgott, which you saw. In a second here, we're going to go over equipment. And for equipment, we have 2 Bandit Curved Swords in Flame Art with Flaming Strike, of course, for a ton of damage. We're using any seal for buffs. We have the Raptor's Black Feathers, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Shard of Alexander, Fire Scorpion Charm, Claw Talisman, Fire tier, Thorny tier. We're using Market Shackle. Let's talk about stats. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 70 Faith here, no need for the Faith tier. We could use the Fire tier and Thorny tier to get a lot of damage, 22 Mind, 24 Endurance, 20 Strength. And then for our buffs, we're going to be using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. Flame Grant Me Strength's better here because we're doing both fire and physical damage, so we'll get the 20% from each, which makes it better than Hellish Reburer here. At number 2, we have Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike. Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike is probably the most powerful incantation in the game. It can one-shot several of the bosses, many of the bosses in the game, particularly the bigger ones, and if you haven't tried it yet, definitely give this one a try. By the way, if you ever struggle with any of the dragons in the game, any of the bigger bosses at all, much like the Envoy's Longhorn, this is an excellent choice to take them down quickly, much less RNG in terms of the bigger bosses. Let's jump into equipment here. For equipment, we have the Gravelstone Seal and the Jellyfish Shield. We did hit 51 Poise, we're at 54 Poise. We have the Ritual Swords Talisman, the Godfrey Icon, I'll explain that one in a second. We have the Lightning Scorpion Charm, Phlox Canvas Talisman, Lightning tier, Faith tier. Let's jump into stats for this one. Now, the Godfrey Icon was technically patched out. Some people say it still works, some people say it doesn't work. That being said, all of the other lightning incantations, which you're most likely going to combine, like Lightning Spear, you can throw in the Godfrey Icon and make sure that you get more damage on them too with the same exact setup. And then the same stats here, 60 Vigor, 80 Faith with the Faith tier. We're using Golden Vow, Hellish Reburer, and of course, Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike. And at number 1, of course, we have the Blasphemous Blade. You probably had no doubt in your mind this was going to make number 1. It's one of the easiest and best weapons to use in the entire game, and the Ash is completely faith scaling. I have a setup for you that I want to show after this, in which you can include incantations, fire incantations as well, which is really powerful, but overall there's no doubt the Blasphemous Blade is absolutely king of faith builds. Without a doubt, the highest ceilings go to Ancient Dragon, Lightning Strike, and Burn of Flame. If you're looking to buff stuff up like crazy, definitely go with those two, but for reliability, healing, consistent fire damage, and complete ease of use, Blasphemous Blade is number one. Let's jump into equipment for this one. For equipment, we have the Blasphemous Blade plus 10, we have the Giant Seal. I'm going to show a setup for Incantations too. We hit 51 poise, we have the Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Fire Scorpion Charm, Ritual Shield Talisman, Fire Tier, Faith Tier. And then we have the same exact setup as far as stats go. For those using this timestamp, we hit 80 Faith with the Faith Tier, 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 24 Endurance, 20 Strength. We're using Golden Vow and Hellish Fury to buff this. And once again, because it's pure fire damage, Hellish Fury will beat Flame Grant Me Strength by 5%, and it's 10 seconds longer. Before we show off the incantation version, which will allow you to use fire incantations as well, I want to mention that the video after this one I'm really looking forward to. It's a whole bunch of things that I haven't covered. It's going to be 10 more fun builds. It should be the day after this one, including the Royal Greatsword, which I either haven't covered or haven't covered in a long time, Grafted Blade Greatsword, Dragon Scale Blade, and more. I know I don't sound it because I've been sick the past week, but I am really excited for that one. There's a couple really cool builds in there. Definitely be sure to check that one out. That'll be the one after this one. Now for adding more to the build, let's show it off here. Giant's Flame Take Thee is my preferred addition on one Giant Seal to use with the Blasphemous Blade. It combos really well. The combination of having the extra range there and then having the Blasphemous Blade is pretty much perfect. You can do a ton of fire damage, and it's a lot of fun to use them together too. And for this setup, fairly similar here, Blasphemous Blade, Giant Seal. We had part of the Fire Monk set on, Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Fire Scorpion Charm, Godfrey Icon because the incantation we're using is chargeable, Fire Tier, and Faith Tier. Thanks for watching this one. I hope you enjoyed my top 8 Faith builds, and I hope everybody enjoyed the build for the Magma Blades too. Be sure to sub if you're not subbed to this point. I'm going to be covering a ton of Elden Ring content. I can't wait. There's more fun and new builds coming right after this one, and we're going to do the top 8 for each stat type, so be sure to also comment as well what you want to see next, whether that's strength, intelligence, arcane, etc. Thanks for watching, and see you at my channel.